what do you hope the industry looks like in 10 years? Like, how do you hope things evolve?
First example, 6% of all the DeFi total value locked gets stolen every year. So first and foremost, more secure. Second, a little bit more, that's going to be the hardest part, more demystified. At the moment, we are seeing a lot of like meme coins getting onto the news. We're seeing a lot of like weird things happening and getting onto the news because they generate a lot of hype, generate a lot of like, numbers, views, and so on and so forth. People are interested in making money, of course. But there's much more in the industry. So I would like to see a better messaging around like CBIL resistant products, around gasless account abstractions, not just like this uber technical jargon. We need to onboard masses. We cannot talk like engineers. This doesn't work. Then I would say Web3 gaming, in my opinion, but again, super opinionated, biased here, I would say, because I come from the VFX, movie, gaming, and so on industry, but Web3 gaming is going to be a game changer.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Devs Do Something. Today's guest is Vitto from Alchemy, and we went really deep into a couple of things in this episode. The first of which is the Web 2.5 stack, right? So what are the most modern pieces of the front-end infrastructure, right? WAGMI, VM, and also the back-end infrastructure, right? So a little discussed portion of Web3 or development in crypto is that a lot of times if you want to be able to perform a dApp, you need to have some kind of intermediary backend that helps you index data from the chain and make sure that the user experience is actually a really good one. So we walk through different backend setups. Vitto has done some recent research on this that we'll put a link to his post in the show notes. And then we also walk through Create Web3 dApp, which is a framework that Vitto has put together that makes it really, really easy to get started with a new Web3 front end. We walk through that, the creation of that. And then finally, we went really deep into developer advocacy and relations, right? So with Create Web3 dApp, that's used by a lot of people, right? How did Vitto get that into the hands of many people? Many of you listening to this, you want other people to take note of your work. Devs are uncomfortable with promotion. It's a kind of typical thing, but you don't have to be overly promotional to get lots of people using your stuff, right? Obviously, as Vitto says, having a Twitter following like Vitto has of over 100,000 people is helpful, but there are other things you can do to share your knowledge as well. So we walk through all that stuff. If you're somebody that's interested in, again, both this kind of modern entire stack around building Web3 products and sharing your work and getting it into the hands of more people, I think you're going to really get a lot out of this episode. I enjoyed this one, and I think you will too. As devs, we all love hackathons. They're a great way to boost your skill set, meet other engineers, and add to your portfolio of work. At Superfluid, we've sponsored many hackathons and decided to start putting on a hackathon of our own, the Superfluid Wave Pool. This hackathon is a little bit different though in that it's continuous, it's always open. You can submit any project built on Superfluid at any point throughout the month and have a chance to earn thousands of dollars in prizes depending on how your project stacks up. In just the last couple of months, we've seen dozens of teams build really amazing projects that run the gamut from Superfluid developer tutorials to full-fledged applications to a proof of concept Superfluid StarkNet implementation that we thought was really, really impressive. So we encourage you to check it out today. You can learn more by going to superfluid.finance/wavepool. That's superfluid.finance/wavepool. Happy hacking. All right, we're back today with another episode of Devs Do Something with Vitto. Welcome, Vitto.
Hey, Sam, thank you for having me here. I was just saying, well, you really look like a reporter with a microphone on you.
Yeah, thank you. We try to look very, very pro. I think it'd be helpful if I had a stand for it instead of just holding it. But nonetheless, we're really excited to have this conversation. We'll get into a few things that we were actually just discussing before we started recording, right? Tooling, some of your thoughts on DevRel. We have a lot we can unpack with you today. But before we do that, the first question we ask everybody that comes on is how they got into this industry. So Vitto, how did you get into crypto?
That's an amazing question. It's kind of funny. I think I'm a late starter in crypto. I didn't start like in 2013, like somewhere like 2017. I started in 2020. I think before than that, I was in completely different industry. I was like an artist. I was doing like Academy of Fine Art. I was working in the digital animation like domain, doing digidouble for the movie industry. And then I decided to just go back to web development. I was developing a little bit on my spare time during the pandemic. And I had a friend. He's one of these people that started like in 2013 and it didn't make millions, but still like he started in 2013. It was like, dude, you should definitely look into like cryptos. You should look into, he didn't say into Web3 because Web3 wasn't a thing at that point. In the meantime, and I was always like, no, dude, that's like a scam. That's a bubble. Like my dad is a bank guy. That will never work. Continue living your dreaming world. And then I was creating content on Twitter. I guess the mix between Twitter starting to become crypto Twitter. My friend, that is actually my best friend, keep on telling me, yo, you're a great developer. You should definitely like look into smart contracts. I was like, okay, let's freaking do it. I don't remember what resources were there. I think like crypto zombies and another couple. I was like, okay, let me do this. And I developed my first smart contract. I was completely blown away. Thing is, as an artist, I didn't really understand the documentation. Like I wasn't really technical, and my English is not my first language either. All the documentations were like in English, a lot of jargon. I was like, I have no idea what is going on. ChatGPT wasn't a thing either. So I started like translating all the documentation in like human readable English. And turns out it went great. Like people went banana on Twitter, started creating a bunch of content there. Web3 started becoming a thing. And yeah, and one day I met Alan from the Alchemy team and I started working with them. And since then, it's been an incredible journey.
I love it. Yeah, that's a fascinating story. I did not know you were an artist. That's really cool. Yeah, there's always an interesting background people have. It's very rare that even the people that got into this in 2012 or whatever, that's still it's always an interesting story. But I want to come back to documentation in a bit because I think that that's super interesting that like you probably got good at writing documentation by realizing that like you could actually recognize that it wasn't very good. And I think you have to kind of come in with a beginner's mind to really see the holes in docs, right? So I think that's something we can definitely unpack later. But what were some of the early things you did in this space, right? You said you were blown away when you first wrote your first smart contract. What were some of the early projects and things that you worked on, even with Alchemy? Like, what were some of the early forays you had in this space?
That's a great question. So the first thing, I like to embark at this kind of, sorry, let me take a step back. Yes, the industry is full. The cool thing about Web3 is that you have any kind of person inside. And especially like if we go back to 2020, 2021, you had like a lot of artists and a lot of programmers, of course, but also like normal people that were doing their daily jobs and they were just interested in the beer market. So it was kind of eclectic at that time. And some of these stayed into the industry. Be one of them, sort of. But anyway, I really like to embark in these kind of adventures from time to time. So like, for example, when I'm exploring a protocol, I try to build a tool just because I really love that. And I love also like making something that can stay in time and it's just like not just coding. And I guess my first project, folks, it was a decentralized OnlyFans. And I was super proud of that. It took me, I think, 2 months to develop it. It didn't really work super well because, of course, it was my first smart contract. I had no idea what security was, and we should go back to that. Super important. I had no idea about gas optimization. Solidity was like a way older, I think, version, so I didn't implement a bunch of like checks and so on and so forth. But it was kind of working, and I was proud, and I published a tutorial about that. But on top of that, I think my job since the beginning was to onboard people into Web3 and kind of demystify what's the core messaging of Web3 and blockchain equals to crypto and making easy money and NFTs and making easy money here there. And it was more about the technology and how the technology can support like third world countries people or like identity management as well as value exchange in general on the internet. And so I guess on that end, I always kept myself on the beginner's level. But as a dev role at Alchemy, so not on my personal time, I started developing more in-depth things. And I know that we'll go back to these in a few seconds, but tooling was one of the main passions and is still one of the main passions because it helps developers build it. And that's what we need at the moment, better devs.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. And you're right that we'll unpack tooling a bit more. But for people, because this is actually relatively recent for you, but for people that are like you a couple of years ago, who are onboarding themselves into this industry, they're choosing to be contrarians right now and dive headfirst into crypto when the markets are down and everything. What kinds of things would you recommend that they look at, right? And maybe we could tailor this to people that have already written a smart contract. They understand how blockchains work. Maybe they have a bit of web development experience. They know JavaScript, right? They're not total beginners, but they want to go from like kind of freelancer outsider, into like maybe a junior dev role, or like actually building their first professional project in the space. Any advice or recommendations for that person?
Ton, actually, great question. And I want to divide it into sectors. You started saying beer market. For those that don't know, like we're saying, okay, you know what is a smart contract, so probably you also know what is a beer market. It's a weird connection, but it's true, right? So the first thing is don't get scared about the beer market. Beer market is a financial thing. Builders are going to build anyway. If you want the proof of that, you can look at our developers report at Alchemy. We issue a developer report every 4 months. You can find it on our website. But if you want to look at more reports, there is like Silver Lake, I think, report, and Messari that is creating a lot of reports. And you will see that developers are growing throughout all the chains, not just like Ethereum, for example, like throughout all the chains. Number of smart contract developed has grown a lot, incredibly, since the start of the beer market, as well as the number of users and wallets on different chains. So first thing is, if you're looking around and you're like, oh, okay, I wrote my first smart contract, but I'm uncertain if I want to join the industry because, you know, the beer market. Well, remember that the biggest companies in the world have been built during beer markets, Google, Airbnb, and so on and so forth, all coming from beer markets. This goes to the second point, that is, how do you get started? The problem is, with the beer market, it's harder to get started because companies are not like hiring like crazy. If you join during the bull market, everyone is hiring, everyone is getting paid like a ton of money, right? Everything is super happy. During a bear market, there are more issues. There are layoffs going on. There are things going on. The answer there is, of course, build up your knowledge. That is the first thing, but also networking is key. And this is something that I wished I knew more when I started my career. But it's literally is when you go to the gym, right? You train and everyone tells you, yeah, training is like 30% of the job. 70% of the job is your diet. This is so true with like looking for a job in the tech industry as well. 70% of the job is not your skills. Of course, these are very important, but also the people that you know, the way that you can sell your abilities, the way that you think, the way that you solve problems. Yeah, a lot of things that all goes back to human subjects. And to do that, there are multiple ways. The cool thing about Web3 is that it's community driven. So you can A, join a DAO, or B, join a community of developers. On that end, a couple of names is like Alchemy University kind of covers all of the stages here, from I never written a smart contract to I know how the blockchain works, I know how to create decentralized applications, and I also have a community. So Alchemy University is a bootcamp and an Ethereum bootcamp, 7 weeks bootcamp, completely free. I'm not selling you anything, and you know that, Sam. It's just like you can go there, learn whatever you need to land your first job as a junior. I won't lie. After junior is not about how many hours of tutorials you've watched, but how many years you have worked in the industry. But a junior place in the industry. On top of that, we have a community, 75,000 developers, all building, all doing your same stuff, building projects, raising funds, creating groups, creating teams, developing products, marketing their products, getting to know each other, answering each other's questions. Super helpful. In these kind of communities, on top of that, there are others like Learn Web3 DAO, Developer DAO. I don't know, like literally there are a ton of Web3 amazing communities. These are my favorite ones. There, you will find not only other developers, but you will find the CEOs of companies. Web3 is very small. That's where Web3 CEOs hang out. If not CEOs, as CXOs. Hang in these communities, talk with people, be useful, answer to questions, show off your skills. Potentially, And I'll tell you why. Because we have, for example, an ambassador program, and we hired a ton of people out of our ambassador program. And we don't even interview them. We don't ask for their curriculum. We see that they're useful. We see that they're helpful in the useful for a human is awful, but helpful in the community, and that they help each other, that they answer questions, that they're active, that they love Web3, they live by the ethos of Web3. And once they have proved, their skills, that's all that matters. We just hire them. So I would say, going back, TLDR is don't be scared about the beer market. Second, if you are just starting out, find good learning resources. Luckily, different from when I started, we have amazing resources right now. Again, Alchemy University, Learn Web3 DAO. Crypto Zombies is actually still pretty cool, and their team is amazing. They're super fun. I mean, we have a ton of other Polygon University and think about, but I'm sure Patrick Collins' videos, of course. What are we talking about? And amazing Sam's podcasts that are very interesting, especially on the networking part. That is the third point. This networking, knowing people, meeting people, understanding where your skills can become most useful. And you actually might end up making a shit ton of money, but that's another story with networking. But yeah.
Yeah, so on the networking bit, I mean, this may be even more. Let's expand this a bit more to just like the idea that you need to communicate what you can do to the world, right? So a lot of people listening to this, they're actually pretty advanced or like mid-level developers, right? So there is a cohort of beginners, but a lot of people are actually fairly advanced. They're pretty skilled. The thing is, though, is that in order for you to actually capitalize on that skill set, you have to put yourself in the position to either work with people that can leverage your skill sets, or if you're going to build something yourself, you have to sell a bit, right? And you have to sell or at least communicate what you can do, or communicate your ideas to the broader ecosystem if you want to have the impact that you think you should have, especially if you're an elite developer, right? That could be you literally building your own protocol and communicating that to the world. That could be you want to share your knowledge so that you get a better job, or it can mean, hey, I have an idea for where the Ethereum network should go, and I want to draft an EIP. All of these are very human-centric tasks. All of these require you to occasionally get on stage and communicate. They require you to write good blog posts to communicate, right? You're a very good communicator, right? It's reflected in your Twitter following, all the communication you put out with the Alchemy team, the Alchemy docs, Alchemy University. For devs who are really, really elite when it comes to like writing contracts and writing code, what advice do you have for them when it comes to actually getting better at the soft skills side of things? Do you have anything that they could do, anything that they should maybe know that would make them better at that?
I actually have goosebumps because it just reminded me about this amazing sentence that I got told by my kind of mentor. He's an amazing social media manager, marketer, and growth hacker, and much, much more. And it was like, you become a great communicator when you have 20 followers, not when you have 100K followers. You become a great communicator when in your podcast there are 10 listeners, not 1,000 listeners. You become a great streamer when in your stream there are 5 attendees. How do you call that? Like people tuned in, and not 100,000. And this is so important. No one is born a great communicator. Of course, talent is a thing, but talent without practice is nothing. And you have to develop your skills. So how do you become a great communicator is simply by communicating. How do you become a great technical writer is simply by writing great technical content. No, this is not completely true. It's not like the seasons will go on and on, even if you don't do anything. And this is something I actually learned in the art industry. That is the art. They should write a book about that, but it's the art of accepting feedback. And we all be like, in the Silicon Valley, I would say in our culture, in the tech culture, this is kind of well known. Not everyone is great at taking feedback, but usually people are great at taking feedback. And it's by culture, I would say. But this is not the truth in many other domains. It's not the truth in people with other backgrounds. I was one of them, right? When I started in the art industry, you tried to tell me that my drawing sucked, and I was like, "Whoa, how do you dare that? It's amazing, it's beautiful, everyone should love this." And then with time, from time to time, of course, people were hating me. They were like, "Wait, I literally was trying to be useful." Of course, there are like different types of feedback, but they were like constructive feedback. They were just trying to be useful. And I was like, okay, maybe it's my problem. And then I started noticing that if you don't get to If you don't love your job, you work, not your job. You work, the byproduct of your work, too much if you don't get too aficionated to it. And you start accepting critiques and constructive feedback that are teaching you how to get better. And you go back to the thing. If you get 1% better every time you write a blog post, if you get 1% better every time you write a tweet, every time you host a podcast, every time you go on a space, ultimately you will get 1,000% better. And this is, it's like science, right? It's not something, oh, I'm not like that, I won't get better. No. You will get better. You will learn a lot. So to answer your question, for anyone that wants to become better at soft skills, definitely start networking. Invite people to a call. Hey, do you want to have a 30 minutes call and just chat with them about their experiences? Try to interview them. Try to learn more. Be genuinely interested. Then, of course, there are more like lectures and like readings that you can read, books, such as, okay, this is like black magic book, but I love that if you take it the right way, is How to Win Friends by John Carnage. I can't remember. It's like Carnage. I will send it to you. It's an amazing book. Then there is another one that is called, I can send you all the list. I don't know if we can like link it everywhere. There are like these free books that completely change the way I approach to people. TLDR, what all these books are saying are A, be genuinely interested in the people you're talking to. If there's someone you're looking to, or you're interested, or they will spot it. Everyone talks to people every single day. B is communicate in a way that people are used to understand. So what do I mean by that? If I have to explain something really, really complex, I will use a very, very simple example. If I need to talk about something that is very, very simple, I will use a very, very complex example. And this is kind of the theory of contrast. And there are a lot of like these tips and tricks that you can use to become a better communicator. But at the end of the day, the thing is you have to communicate and you have to create content and you have to host spaces to be good at that. Like, for example, Sam, I'm sure that, and then I would go a step back. Sorry if I'm ranting, but like, I'm sure that you got way better from time to time in hosting podcasts. That first time, maybe you were like, I don't know what to say. But now you're like, oh, this is my house. I know who command here. I know what are the rules. I know how things work. And I more or less know what people will say. Like you have an organization and you learn that. Taking a step back, sorry. What you said is super important, and is at the end of the day, there are 8 billion people at this point on the earth. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And something that we should learn every single day is that we are probably not special. Like 99.9% of these people is not special by themselves, right? They won't be lucky. They won't be like chosen. Things will go just as they should go. To shine in this kind of group of normality, I would say, is so easy that you can just do something different. It's nothing crazy. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be an enlightened person. Better if you are, of course, people will be more interested, but you don't have to. You don't have to be an expert either sometimes, unfortunately, in the things that you say to shine above like the rest of like peers that are competing against you. How do you do that? You host a podcast, you create content, you create a community, you build an online presence. You build something useful for people to use. And people will naturally start thinking that you're smarter than you are. Maybe you're freaking smart. Maybe you're a geek brain. That's not the point. But if you do something useful for the others, people will just think that you're smarter than you are. If you don't do anything, you're just asking for something. Be a giver, not a taker. It's like spot.
Tons of useful advice in there. I would also say that if you're uncomfortable with the idea of creating content or posting things or hosting a talk, you can definitely just lead with the work, right? You don't have to like inject yourself into everything, right? It might help certain people who are comfortable with it. Like you're very good. You had a tweet go viral the other day about like Netflix or something like that. I think you had like a pretty funny post about like how you're going to use Pirate Bay now that Netflix is cracking down on passwords, right? That's funny. Like you inject personality into things and that can help. Patrick Collins does this too. But if you're uncomfortable with that, there's nothing wrong with just like saying, dude, I built this really cool thing. Check out this cool thing. And the reality is that you have probably some set of knowledge that is very unique, especially if you've gone down a rabbit hole in this industry, right? If you spent weeks going into, I don't know, MEV. If you spent weeks going into MEV, you've built your own searchers, There's lots of proprietary information in that space, so maybe you don't want to share everything. But if you do want to share some things you've learned about building searchers or building things in Rust, chances are that there are a lot of people that you think are geniuses that have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to that area. So, and it doesn't take actually that long to get there either. So, I would keep that in mind, right? Your knowledge is probably more valuable than you think it is if you're at least a mid-level dev and above in the space and you've gone deep on something. So, just something to add to that. But okay, so you mentioned you like to
I
build
can't relate
things.
more. It's so true.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely true, and people underrate the knowledge they do have. But let's get into. You mentioned you like to build things, right? This is something you like to do. You like tooling. You're passionate about tooling. It's a big part of your work. Let's get into some of the things that you've been working on over the last year plus, right? And we'll kind of unpack each of them. We'll talk through why they're useful, and we'll maybe even get behind the scenes on how you built them. But let's talk to maybe the most famous one, and that's Create Web3 dApp. So this is something that you've been a main contributor to. Looks like if you look at the GitHub, there's been a lot of contributors at this point. But what is Create Web3 dApp? And then we'll maybe unpack it some more from there.
Love that. Thank you for this. So Create Web3 App is my baby, and I'm so, I just told you don't fall in love with your work. I literally fell in love with Create Web3 App. I'm still open to feedback. It's a Web3 CLI decentralized applications builder. What does it mean? It's an NPX package that you can run through your terminal to spin up decentralized applications on the fly. Let me give you some use cases. Every time you need to create a new decentralized application, what happens is that you need to decide which libraries to use. You need to understand which dependencies to use. And that's best case scenario. You're alone in your room and you just need to develop a new application. Or you at a hackathon and you just want to kickstart a new application. There is like 20, 30 minutes of process that you need to go through. Create Web3 app, got you covered. Done. You run this command, you select which chain you want to use, which packages you want to import, if you want hardware on the backend to develop also smart contracts, if you want to create a smart contract. So we're using the OpenZeppelin library. If you're familiar with the OpenZeppelin smart contract wizard, you can do the same for your CLI. And even better, it will also spin up the whole project for you, setting up the RPCs, whole hardware configuration. It will automatically link the folder of the APIs into your front end. That, folks, if it's the first time that you're doing that, it's crazy. It's not like DevX that in that case. But anyway, on top of that, the big problem is teaching Web3 is that you need to start from the front end. And as soon as you start teaching the front end, you're probably familiar with it, Sam. It's a mess. There are too many front end frameworks, libraries, dependencies, and everything is competing against each other. With Create Web3 app, there is an opinionated standard. Essentially, it's opinionated, but not that opinionated. What I mean by that is that it's a Next.js application. So it respects the Next.js standard project folder structure, not the 13th. What do I mean by that is that in the 13th, now we have the source folder with all the pages inside, and then you have the app folder with the app routes inside. Not everyone is super comfortable with that. So I also noticed that some of the documentation is rolling back to the older version of the project folder. So it's using the older one. You will have your Next.js application on there and where you can also build your APIs inside. And you will have your Hardhat project, standard Hardhat project that you can download also from like the OpenZeppelin smart contract wizard. Third use case that is for the people that do our job, Sam, and is demos. How many times have you ended up developing over and over again the same landing page, the same snippet, the same component? Good sense would be, I can save that code. Yes. Reality is that we live in a very fast-paced world. And after 3 days, we forget where our code is. So you want a place where you can just start from not scratch, but a boilerplate, and then start developing from there. Now, there's another feature that is really, so for DevRels is really useful because on stage you can just run it. For example, Stafford Fila from Polygon, she's using that for her Polygon ZK EVM. Then we have other ambassadors that are using that. We have a lot of boot camps before hackathons that are using Create Web3 app because it's product agnostic. Once you have the boilerplates, you can build with Lens protocol, you can build with Bioeconomy, you can build with everything. This brings me to the next point, that on top of the boilerplates, we also have this thing called templates. We also have the components secondary, but templates is if you're at a hackathon or a bootcamp and you want to develop an NFT marketplace, chances are that you will develop always the same standard components at first. That is NFT gallery, NFT minter, profile page, wallet connection, and you name it. You have the NFT marketplace template inside Create Web3 dApp. So instead of starting from a boilerplate from scratch, you can start from a template. And there are a lot of templates. Also, the decentralized OnlyFans that is actually Patreon at this point, of course, because of comms. But that said, Create Web3 dApp is a CLI tool builder that allows developers kickstart their Web3 applications in 4 minutes. And yeah, it was amazing building it.
It's very cool. Yeah, I think it's a really, really useful thing to get people started. It's also amazing you have the templates in there. It does save a lot of time. I was just actually wrestling with some of the newer Next 13 features last night, believe it or not. And yeah, it's easy to get stuck on small things on the front end that are not central to the application for sure. So it's great that the tooling like Create Web3 dApp exists. A couple of follow-up questions on this. One of them, I'll start with the more back to our soft skills discussion earlier. You have lots of contributors on this, right? If you look at the GitHub, lots of people have contributed to it. It looks like other people have probably built templates, and it has a bunch of stars. People know that it exists. Let's say that I'm somebody who wants to build some other similar tooling thing, right? Maybe it's a library of smart contracts that are useful for some use case, right? Maybe I'm into Huff, right? Like the Huff guys listening to this are into Huff, and they want to get more people using Huff. What did you do to promote Create Web3 dApp? Like, how did you get it into the hands of more people? How did you get people interested in it? Like, I would love to understand like what the distribution side of this actually looked.
Love this question. So the answer has many phases. The most obvious one that probably people listening to this podcast might have already thought about is like, oh, Vitto has a lot of followers on Twitter. It's easy to market things when you have a lot of followers. True. I cannot say it's not true. It's easier. It's of course like you post something, and that's why I really suggest you to build an online presence. I never built it before. It's something that happened. It's just about consistency. You can do the same. People will see it. That's why social medias are so powerful. So first thing, I definitely started posting it on Twitter, talking about it, showing about it. The second one is there's no marketing in the world that can sell a bad product. There's no way. Good product first, but great marketing after that. So luckily, Create Web3 dApp is one of these cases where I was the target. I was the person in need. I needed a tool to spin up decentralized applications. I kind of knew what I needed. Actually, this is not even true because the first version of Create Web3 dApp had like components inside the CLI builder, and everyone was getting confused. So I started doing user interviews. This helped me getting the product better, and better, updating it, iterating over it. And every time I update it, just like as you said, Sam, whenever you develop something cool, you might not want to share the underlying functionalities or technicalities because it may be something proprietary. Create Web3 dApp is fully open source. But in that case, I just started sharing all the updates and all the things that I was doing and all the challenges. And I was like, oh my God, this is so hard, folks. This is not working. Foundry with like non-root folders, it's insane. There's no documentation. The cool thing is that Web3 is such a small world. So when you start talking about these things, it's like I'm building on top of Foundry. Chances are that if you have a bunch of followers, again, build your community, people will contact you. And it's like, oh, this is super cool. You're building on top of Foundry. Wait, let's work together. Let's hop on a call. That's a win-win situation, right? You're implementing Foundry. They are marketing Foundry and Create Web3 dApp at the same time. Same happened for other tools, for example, with Lens Protocol. I was developing a thing with Lens Protocol integrated, and they contacted me, and we started sharing each other's updates about that. So I would say creating a community, talking to people, creating a product that is useful, open source. Open source is so important, especially in Web3. Everything is open source. I just finished developing today a universal scraper that translates an entire website into embeddings for ChatGPT. Completely different scenario. I need it for another project, but it takes like 3 minutes to do that. It's super freaking powerful, production ready. It's open source on GitHub. Also, the CloudFormation is open source on GitHub. You can just go run the CloudFormation, spin it up on AWS, and boom, you have your universal scraper, and you can do whatever you want. if you learn how to use it. But that's another part. But the code is there. So open source is very important. For open source, there are like a lot of tips and tricks, like document everything. README has to be clear. Open a call. You need to be proactive. The open source community won't get paid by itself. And then so you nurture your community. And then I think the last one is luck. In a way where Create Web3 App, because it was a useful product, not just luck, but because it was a useful product, got popular into these like pre-hackathon bootcamps. These perfect use cases. Like we didn't even have to organize that. Literally one day, a guy called us and it was like, "Hey folks, I'm thinking," wrote us, he didn't call us, but I was thinking about running this workshop. It's a 5 days bootcamp actually. And we want to teach Web3 technologies. We want to teach Alchemy, of course, but for everything, we want to use Create Web3 App. Turns out the participants, the attendees of that bootcamp won 2 out of like the X prizes in the hackathon. So we were super proud, and they used Create Web3 App as well. So it's a combo of thing. Honestly, at the core of everything, folks, is putting your knowledge out there. I think I did a decent job. There are people that do a way better job than me at sharing what I'm learning and like trying to give value to people. People appreciated that. So when I post something, they are like, okay, maybe this is interesting. Maybe it's not. I should post a lot, but maybe this time is interesting. Wow, let's take a look actually. And it turns out that was Create Web3 App. So people like that. I hope it answers your question. I think we can go on like marketing bootcamp for the next 4 hours probably.
Yeah, I think that that's useful context, right? I mean, you can't deny the fact that having a following is helpful, but you definitely did more than I think people might realize. I think the user interviews thing was very interesting. I don't think it's very common that people building open source projects that they want other people to use do user interviews, right? They don't think about it in that way, but they should, right? You're basically building a product, right? And you should think about it that way.
Can I share with you a trick? This is insane. That's a very good trick. So whenever you're building something, like toolings, potentially you have a ton of competitors, right? So what you can do, best case scenario, your tool gets swapped. Your competitors get swapped with your tool. And the question usually is, where are my competitors like being backlinked? Where are they linked? Where are people talking about my competitors? There are tools. I won't say the tool, but just like look for backlinks searcher. There are tools that literally you can put a website and look at all the backlinks from that website or web page. So for example, if you have a GitHub page of your competitor, you can just put that link onto that tool and it will give you all the backlinks that are pointing to that page. So you can just go talk with all of the people that are like writing or maintaining these pages and be like, hey, you have an amazing list of tools. And maybe you have to think that. Again, we go back to, you have to be genuinely interested into people. But hey, you have an amazing list of tools. Are you interested in adding also this one? Chances are the people won't answer you, like, because that's called mailing. But once every 10 times, people will actually answer you and you will have an extra backlink or an extra guide talking about your tool. Again, if you have a following, if you have things, chances are that more people will answer to you because you have kind of trustworthiness. Build a community.
Interesting. Yeah, there's SEO is a place that people don't think about quite enough. It's actually, I think, become a bit underrated in relation to some other things. But that's maybe a discussion for another day. Maybe it's the separate marketing bootcamp we can do. But getting into the tooling side a bit more. Okay, so you've had the chance to, as a result of you're building this, to like explore a lot of different tooling, especially on the front end side. But for someone building, like, let's say, for example, I have a protocol and I want to use all the most powerful, up-to-date, best tooling to build the front end out for my protocol, right? What does that stack look like? Is it like this WAGMI rainbow kit thing? Is it the tried and true ethers and just interfacing with the contracts directly? Like what are the best tools of the trade today? And what should people be using if they're starting from scratch? Like, I think a lot of times people get stuck in things that they initially started using a couple of years ago. They don't necessarily follow the new updates as much. But like, how do you see the tooling space for building front ends?
So we got better. I would say, so from the start, since the start of the bear market, we got better. 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 We got better way better. It was kind of ridiculous a couple of years back. Today, we have a lot of developers SDKs, Web3 developers SDKs. I'm thinking very thoroughly about the answer because I know that if I don't mention the right ones, people will start hating me. So I would say standard of the industry. It's not even my favorite one. It's like what people usually use that I think that's really, really powerful is front end. And we're talking about let's look at production ready Web3 application and then go on to a decentralized, fully decentralized application because there is this difference, right? On one hand, there is like, I'm a diehard fan of Web3 and I want to build everything that is decentralized. You might want to do that. It's not always suggested, I would say, because you might incur in like an extra cost. But most cases, you will also use databases to like get data persistency and data availability and do not have like transactions, every single action on your application. Also, OpenSea uses databases, of course. So in that case, I would say front end is the same. Next.js is the industry standard. React is the industry standard. I know a lot of people using Svelte and Vue. It's not that they're bad frameworks, it's that there are just less developer tools for these, like hooks, for example, WAGMI. Given that you're using React, definitely WAGMI. WAGMI is my love. They also issued Beam recently. I'll be honest, I didn't, and I will tell you why in a few seconds, but I didn't really enjoy Beam from the get-go. It took me like some time. WAGMI is still my go-to. Beam, I'm still like a little bit, I don't know if I like you, but it's a great tool. Like their team is incredible. They ship as fast as they can probably. And WAGMI is a collection of hooks that just make your life better when dealing with like smart contract transactions, dealing with wallets, connection, and so on and so forth. Connection. RainbowKit is great. I guess they have a couple of issues. Like, for example, you can't intercept when the user is changing like account. Like RainbowKit internally does it, but from the outside, there's no hook that gets exposed out of that. Anyway, there are like a couple of limitations that at a certain point after using it for like a year, I was like, wow, maybe I want to change. So I would say Connect Kit from Family. They're amazing. Like their designers are incredible. They have a bunch of layouts. You can interactively test the wallet on your web page. It's incredible. It's really, really well done. The library is really, really well done. And it's also suggested by the WAGMI team. Then, on top of that, to deal with chain, like transactions, Ether.js, still my lovely one. Alchemy SDK, of course, wrapper on top of Ether.js, also with enhanced APIs implemented. Enhanced APIs are a game changer, folks. Essentially, think about if you want to fetch the balance of tokens in a wallet that is not Ethereum. For Ethereum, it's ETH balance. It takes you 1 second. But if it's like any other token that you don't know about, like a full wallet of tokens, you would have to literally scrape the full blockchain, block by block, get all the new contracts that got created with like ERC20 or ERC1155, it depends on how you want to do it, contracts, and then start tracking all the transactions from block genesis to the latest block to understand what's the balance. Insane. It's like billions of transactions. You want to use APIs for that. Trust me, you don't want to go fully decentralized, otherwise it's going to be big cost and maintenance. Announced APIs have everything for you. Tokens API, NFTs API does the same thing, but for NFTs. Transaction simulation API, but this is on the back end. But you can, sorry, no, that's not true. Transaction simulation API to simulate the transactions before they happen, and custom GraphQL webhooks. That this is on the back end. I will go back into this in a few seconds. So you should have everything at this point. Next.js, Wallet ConnectKit, sorry. And then you have WAGMI hooks or Veeam, of course, Alchemy SDK and enhanced APIs implemented into it. If you want Tailwind, and we're good to go. Backend. Backend is my big love. Here, everything changes. Decentralized application is finished. This is how you do it. Your backend is smart contracts. Everything else stays the same. Centralized application 2.5, people call it. I don't like it. It's just application that is actually usable. I would say backend is usually two ways. Standard Express JS backend, I'm okay with that. I love serverless. It's a little bit more expensive, but it lifts you up from like a lot of things that you don't really want to do. Plus, is way more scalable, especially if you're going into production. On top of that, I would say you need some data ingestion. So if you need some data ingestion, like your decentralized exchange, or you need DeFi stuff, we have the custom GraphQL webhooks that allow you to pull data real time from the blockchain, every block, faster than literally anything else. I won't say names, but it's faster than anything else. And you can filter data based on GraphQL queries. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a JSON document where you can put the properties and select like block hash, transactions, what kind of transactions, in which contracts. Let's say you want to keep track of all the transactions coming from Bored Apes. You can do it. You just insert the query inside the GraphQL, set up the webhook, and it will send data every block to you. On top of that, a database, really up to you, based on what you need. And that should be, of course. And then we can go more technical. Oh my God, more technical is like you need gossless transactions. Then you need account abstraction. And account abstraction, there are two ways. The first one is by economy. Rahat is their DevRel, is amazing. And they're doing an amazing job. They started pioneering account abstraction from, 6 months ago. That in Web3 is like 10 years ago. They're doing an amazing job. You should definitely try them out. SDK. Video streaming is, there are a bunch. Superfluid should be used. Live peer should be used. Storage, Bundler is amazing. It's built on top of Arweave. And then IPFS if you want. All at backend. Instead of storing on S3, you can use a decentralized object storage. And then I would say, I will stop here, because otherwise it becomes like too long. But with these tools that we just mentioned, if I'm not forgetting something that is massive, you should be good to go. My only thing is, if you want to implement sessions, this is something that no one is using in Web3. I don't know why, but Next.js has an amazing library called Iron Sessions. And essentially, Iron Sessions allow you to cryptographically hash your sessions on the front end, so you can keep any kind of information into that. And the cryptographic key is in the backend, so you will only decrypt the session value on the backend, and it makes everything way more secure. On top of that, small need: do not use any of your private keys on your front end. In any case, no private keys, no private API keys, nothing, no front end. Create Web3 dApp solves this.
So there's a lot there. I think that the one piece that I'd like to unpack a bit, I think that you gave a really thorough overview of especially the front end stuff, but I really want to unpack this Web 2.5 stack thing. You wrote a really good, I don't know if it's a blog post or set of documentation, but you have a good write up that I'll put in our show notes about this kind of stack, like the sets of APIs you can use and things like that. I have a couple of questions here, but the first one is, do you think that a lot of teams are going to just basically outsource this stuff to a set of services where they just call different APIs? Or will they do a lot of this stuff in-house? For example, you gave the case with tracking token balances. That's like a way harder problem than people realize. I'm glad you laid that out. That's one where I think it'd be a huge pain to just do that in-house, right? Like if I'm a regular protocol, if I'm a Uniswap, there's no way that I want to spend engineering resources building that, right? It just seems silly. So I think that like an API that I can just call to get token balances, that seems like a pretty good idea. You could say the same thing about other kind of indexing services, right? Like Satsuma, for example, has like a sort of wrapper around the graph where they make all of that easy for teams that just need to basically call APIs instead of run their own indexers and things like that. Although the graph decentralized network will be cool when it's live. I guess my high level question here is, what do you think teams are going to do? Are they going to stick with this ethos of I want to build it all? And sorry for the noise there. We'll black that out. But will teams build this stuff in house, or will they just defer to centralized services externally? How do you see that playing out?
So that's a great question. A lot of scenarios, and they all go back to how people live Web3. I would say there is the Web3 of narratives and decentralization that I think is super important to protect. And in that case, people will do as much as possible in-house. That's the whole purpose. Or in-house or through decentralized networks. Now, What I'm saying is that you can decentralize pretty much everything. There is this third, I would say, declination of outsourcing, that is decentralization, right? Before we have insourcing, outsourcing, that's it. Now we have insourcing, outsourcing, and decentralized, where decentralized means that is half like based on our contribution, half based on others people contribution, not half, but like a percentage is on our contribution and a percentage is on others people contribution. So I would say in the future, in the decentralized world, what I would like to say is a more decentralized world where all these things are kept secure and are kept equal and are kept accessible and available and I would say correct by decentralized networks. Now, even the real world though, that is, I want to take a step back. That is the different distinction between Web 2 and Web 3. I listened to your previous podcast with Noam, or a previous episode of your podcast with Noam, amazing engineer from our team. And he's saying something that is really smart that he put at the start because it was pretty smart. That is, it doesn't matter if you're into Web 2 or Web 3, you still have to be a good engineer. And the same thing is true with applications in general. It doesn't matter if it's Web 2 or Web 3. Your application must solve a problem, must be useful, must be performant. That's it. And people will use it. Unless you're making people's money, like you're making money for people. That's another story. But in general, you want a great user experience. To do that, in general, what you want to do is to use the best tools out there. And to create an amazing tool that really, really works, as you said, it takes you so much time, so much engineering effort, a lot of things, especially if you're a company that is not gigantic, like might be, I don't know, Google, Amazon, or Meta at this point. So what you will probably do is use external APIs in the real world. And these APIs will come from any kind of services. And it's just like how it's happening with like AWS or OpenAI. Like if you want to spin up your own GPT version of things, you won't create your machine learning algorithm. You might want, there are open source versions of that, and you might want to use that. But probably you will use the OpenAI API, even if it's costly, even if it can be shady, it can be considered shady in some ways. What are they doing with the data, even if it's not yours? And the same will apply with decentralized world, probably. The only thing that we can do that I think is literally the only thing that we can do to keep it decentralized is to create these services, but decentralize them, not doing things in-house. Doing things in-house is messy, costly, dirty. Like to get any kind of data service in Europe, you need tens of thousands of dollars because you need to be GDPR compliant. There's no way a small company wants to go for it. Like they shut off ChatGPT in Italy in 2 days. And OpenAI went onto that and literally changed all their policies. This probably costed them millions of dollars.
It's a pain. You're right. I mean, doing a lot of this stuff in-house is a pain. You have to be very well capitalized and you have to be ideological about it to really, see the value, I think. But in the end, though, like you said, Noam is right. You have to solve a problem. Maybe the problem you're solving is you're providing the most decentralized experience, and that's fine. But your users will eventually see performance probably decline if you do that in terms of like speed of the application and how everything is working. I think the benefit is having a traceable record of the important things that happened on chain, right? So like if I post something on Lens, there's a transaction, right, that's executed that you can't take back, right? All of the front ends and stuff like that, like the Lens has their API and everything. They have a bunch of stuff they're doing in-house to make the experience for like fetching data and working with it easy. That stuff, if you were to make everybody just, go check the chain for everything, every time when they wanted to start some new front-end application or something like that, it would be untenable, right? It'd be very hard. So I think that's probably the right way to think about it. Okay, so we're getting closer to coming up on time here. We got about 5 minutes left in our hour. One thing I like to ask people, especially in situations like yourself where you see a lot of different projects, you have like kind of a bird's eye view of the space, and what do you hope the industry looks like in 10 years? Like, how do you hope things evolve? Right? What do you see for the future of the industry?
This is the topic of my midnight calls with Patrick Collins, like once a week. It's like, what do we hope the community will look like in 10 years? Well, great question. Would also know your answer. Would like to know your answer as well. But I think first example, 6% of all the DeFi total value locked gets stolen every year. This is just like you go into your bank and your bank director looks you straight into your eyes and says, okay, yeah, you can definitely send me all your money and you can store all of your money here, but there is a good 6% of possibilities that all of your monies will be gone at the end of the year. So you're like, maybe that's a risk that I don't want to have, right? That's a lot of risk. So first and foremost, more secure. Second, a little bit more. That's going to be the hardest part. More demystified. At the moment, we are seeing a lot of like meme coins getting onto the news. We're seeing a lot of like weird things happening and getting onto the news because they generate a lot of hype, generate a lot of like numbers, views, and so on and so forth. People are interested in making money, of course. But there's much more in the industry. So I would like to see a better messaging around like CBIL resistant products, around gasless account abstractions, not just like this uber technical jargon. We need to onboard masses. We cannot talk like engineers. This doesn't work. Then I would say Web3 gaming, in my opinion, but again, super opinionated, biased here, I would say, because I come from the VFX, movie, gaming, and so on industry. But Web3 gaming is going to be a game changer. Like Lens Protocol, one of the best use cases in Web3, like social graphs. Wow, everyone is a friend, everyone know each other. I can port my friends from one platform to the other. Web3 gaming is just the same. I have my friends, I can port my friends from one platform. I wouldn't lie, like thinking about it, Lens Protocol should start probably developing a gaming SDK. Maybe they're already doing. But like I have my friends on all the platforms, or I have my items on all the platforms. Super useful. There is an amazing game that I will shout out because they're amazing. It's called Skyweaver. It's a training card game. Really, really well done. The arts are amazing. You can buy and sell cards with your cryptos. It works seamlessly, really well. It's amazing. Everyone can do it. If you're like in India and you don't have PayPal, you can still do it. That's another thing about Web3. Then and that's another thing that is really, really important to consider is that the biggest players in Web3, the companies that will dominate, are still not there. And this is because Web3 is still young. So there's probably something, because otherwise we will have all the answers, that we haven't yet thought about, or we haven't yet the technologies to build, or we're working on, but we have not ready yet to get out, that will be built in the next 10 years. That potentially will solve a lot of problems. One, for sure, going back to the first answer that I gave, CBIL resistant identity, so important. Not for us that I'm in Europe or for you in America. It's important for people in third world countries where they can wake up in the morning and have their data center completely burned out. It happened where 20,000 identities were completely wiped out nighttime. And people woke up in the morning and were like, oh my God, don't have an identity. Can you think about it? Web3 solves this. And we have to protect it very well. More regulations. That's another thing. Sorry. Last thing, and I will stop ranting, is decentralization is not a synonymous of anarchy. What do I mean by that? Is that if I want my mom, grandma, brother, sister to start using Web3, I want to make sure that they don't lose all of their money. At the moment, there's a way now to recover your wallet if you lose your private key. That's account abstraction. But on top of that, the user experience is still super bad. The reason for that is that also we don't have tools to run chain analysis properly, especially for regulators and policymakers. Amazing company, Chainalysis, super original name. They're working with the European Union to create these tools to enforce law also on the chain. Because remember, the problem here is not to solve law and eliminate laws, but the problem here is to solve value exchange and global barriers. Completely different topics, very easy to mistake them.
Yep, I think that's a fantastic answer. I think that there's a lot we could discuss there. You asked me for my answer. We'll have to save my answer for a different day because it'd be too long to explain it. But I think you're broadly right in that there are some shifts that need to happen, and I think that Web3 gaming Although I was initially a bit skeptical on it, I think it probably will be a source of major adoption because it's pretty hard to regulate against or prevent games from building games, right? This is kind of a fun area where people can be introduced to these concepts, get used to it, and really sustain continued developer growth for a while until governments get their act together a bit and technology can move forward and make the user experience better. So let's see. But we appreciate the insight there.
Totally.
I guess before we wrap up here officially, where do you want people listening to this to find you online? What handful of links would you like to send them to?
Definitely follow me on Twitter. I don't like saying this, but if you want to check out my Twitter, go on Twitter, send me a message, tell me what you're building. I would love to learn more about the amazing things that you're trying out, new protocols, things, again, protocols that you're building, create Web3 app, and so on and so forth. You can find me at Vitto Stack, Vittostack. Alchemy Platform and Alchemy University are our company pages. Alchemy University is more for learning. Alchemy Platform is more for like announcements, such as our amazing custom GraphQLs or account abstraction. The beta is live. You can subscribe. And then our Discord communities. For me personally, also great way is on Telegram. And I will leave you the handle so you can link it wherever it is, because I feel like that if we put it everywhere, it's going to become like a huge spam. But on top of that, if you find the handle in the description, please shoot me a message. I'm still super curious to know more about what the things that you're building.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Vitto. This has been a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I think people listening to this will as well. So thanks again.
The pleasure was mine, Sam. And thank you so much for inviting me. That was great.